"Your wife has been robbing you for 5 years," the little girl blurted out to the millionaire, who had never seen her before and was startled while contemplating his safe. When they checked the hidden cameras, what they saw made the millionaire faint. Comment and rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The rain lashed against the shingle roof of Tobias Albright's mansion when the small figure appeared at the main gate. It was almost 10 at night in Harmony Creek, North Carolina, and the storm that had been sweeping through the state for 3 days showed no signs of letting up. Tobias, 58, was in his private study reviewing the financial reports of his 7 appliance stores for the 3rd time when the intercom buzzed. "Mr. Albright, there's a little girl here at the gate," said Genevieve, the night watchman, his voice laced with concern. "A little kid, soaking wet. Says she needs to talk to you." Tobias furrowed his thick eyebrows, adjusting his reading glasses on his nose. In 40 years of building his business empire, he had learned to distrust anything out of the ordinary. His obsession with financial control had turned every penny into a personal matter, and any interference in his meticulous routine was seen as a potential threat. "A little girl, at this hour?" he muttered, saving the documents on his computer with precise movements. "Let her in, but keep an eye on her." When Tobias descended the marble staircase that led to the main hall, he found a 4-year-old girl standing near the door, dripping water onto the gleaming floor. Her brown hair clung to her small face, and she clutched a rusty metal box tightly to her chest. Her simple, torn clothes betrayed a life on the streets, but her large, determined eyes shone with an intelligence that surprised Tobias. "I'm Araminta," the girl said without any hesitation or fear. "Are you Tobias Albright?" "That's me," he replied, keeping his distance. "What does a child like you want with me at this hour?" Araminta looked directly into his eyes with a seriousness impressive for her age. "Your wife has been robbing you for 5 years." The words struck Tobias like lightning. He felt the blood run cold in his veins as he processed what he had just heard. Valdira, his wife of 15 years, stealing from him? The idea seemed absurd, but the conviction in the child's voice left him deeply disturbed. "How do you know this?" he asked, crouching down to be at the girl's height. "I see things," Araminta replied, opening the rusty box. From inside, she took out small, crumpled papers and blurred photographs. "I live near the downtown market, but sometimes I come here when I'm looking for food. I see her leaving the house with full bags when you're not here." Tobias examined the papers that the girl held out to him. They were bank receipts, some with Valdira's signature, others with numbers he didn't recognize. The photographs, although of poor quality, showed his wife leaving the house carrying large bags at times when he knew he was at work. "Where did you get these?" he asked, his voice beginning to tremble. "In the trash near the bank," Araminta said, shrugging her shoulders. "People throw a lot of stuff away. I'm always looking for useful things." Tobias stood up slowly, his mind calculating the possibilities. He knew every dollar that entered and left his accounts, checked bank statements daily, personally controlled the passwords to all his cards. How could Valdira be stealing from him without him noticing? "Why are you telling me this?" he asked, observing the girl with growing curiosity. "Because you seem sad," Araminta replied, putting the papers back in the box. "I see you sometimes in the office window. You're there alone, always counting papers. My mom used to say that when someone is being robbed by someone they love, they need to know the truth." The mention of her mother caught Tobias's attention. "Where's your mother now?" Araminta's eyes filled with tears, but she held them back with determination. "She passed away last year. Now it's just me." The silence that followed was heavy. Tobias looked at the wet and dirty child standing in his luxurious mansion, carrying evidence of a betrayal he had never suspected. Valdira had always been discreet with money, never asked for exorbitant amounts, never showed interest in the business. How could a former teacher who had given up her profession after the marriage be orchestrating a theft scheme? "Jennifer," Tobias called out, his voice echoing through the hall. "Bring some dry clothes for the girl and prepare a guest room." "I don't need to stay," Araminta said quickly. "I just wanted you to know the truth." "The storm is too strong," Tobias replied, watching the rain continue to beat against the windows. "You can sleep here tonight, and we'll talk more tomorrow." While Jennifer took Araminta to change, Tobias hurried up to his study. His obsession with security had led him to install hidden cameras in every room of the house, including the master bedroom. There were years of recordings, meticulously organized by date. If Valdira was really doing something suspicious, he would have evidence. He turned on the monitoring system and began reviewing the recordings of the past few months. Initially, everything seemed normal. Valdira waking up, making coffee, taking care of the house. But then, around 2 o'clock on a Tuesday of the previous month, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Valdira entered his private study, the same one where he worked every night. She went straight to the safe built into the wall, entered a sequence of numbers that Tobias recognized as his personal password, and removed several stacks of money. She put everything in a discreet bag and left the house through the back door. Tobias's hands trembled as he fast-forwarded through the recordings. The pattern repeated itself systematically, always on Tuesdays and Thursdays, always at the same time, always the same routine. Valdira knew his password, knew his schedule, knew exactly when he would be out. But what shocked him most was discovering that she wasn't acting alone. In a recording from 3 weeks ago, he saw Kevin Butler, his trusted accountant of more than 20 years, sitting in the living room talking animatedly with Valdira. The two examined papers, calculated values on a spreadsheet, and seemed to be coordinating something complex. Kevin, the man who controlled all the finances of his stores, who knew every movement of his accounts, who had access to privileged information about his investments. The man he trusted blindly was conspiring with his own wife. Tobias turned off the computer and sat down heavily in the leather armchair. Reality hit him in successive waves. His wife was systematically robbing him. His most trusted accountant was involved in the conspiracy. And a street kid had discovered everything before him. How had he been so blind? How hadn't his obsession with controlling every penny of his business alerted him to what was happening in his own house? The storm outside seemed to mirror the turmoil in his mind. For years, he had built walls of distrust around his business, checking every transaction, questioning every expense. But he had left his personal life vulnerable, blindly trusting the two people who were closest to his money. When he went downstairs to check on Araminta, he found the girl sleeping soundly in the guest room, still holding the rusty box. Even asleep, she maintained an alert expression, as if she were ready to run away at any moment. She was a child who had learned to survive on the streets, developing instincts that had helped her see a truth that he, with all his business experience, had completely missed. The next morning brought a scorching sun, typical of North Carolina summers, contrasting with the storm of the previous night. Tobias woke up at 5 in the morning, as he had always done for decades, but this time the weight of the recent discoveries made every movement a torture. He had spent the entire night reviewing recordings, systematically documenting each episode of theft that Valdira had committed. When he went downstairs for coffee, he found Araminta sitting at the kitchen table, talking animatedly with Connie, the family cook. The girl had taken a bath and was wearing one of Tobias's dress shirts, which served as a dress on her petite frame. "Good morning, Mr. Albright," Araminta said without any embarrassment. "Connie made pancakes with syrup. Did you know I'd never had real pancakes with syrup before?" Connie, a 62-year-old woman who had worked for the family for 15 years, looked at Tobias with a worried expression. "Mr. Albright, this girl said she's been living on the streets for months." "What's going on?" Tobias poured himself some coffee, avoiding the employee's gaze. How could he explain that an abandoned child had discovered a conspiracy that he, with all his financial paranoia, had failed to perceive? "It's complicated, Connie. We're going to take care of her for a few days." "Have you talked to Mrs. Albright about this?" the cook asked, noticing the tension on her boss's face. "Valdira left early to take care of some errands," Tobias lied, knowing that in fact she had left at 7 in the morning, carrying another discreet bag. "We'll talk when she gets back." Araminta finished eating and turned to Tobias with her disconcerting sincerity. "Are you going to confront her today? Because she always comes back at 3 in the afternoon with the empty bags." The precision of the girl's observation impressed Tobias. For 2 months, he had documented Valdira's schedules without noticing the pattern that a 4-year-old child had identified simply by observing the routine of the house. "How do you know that?" he asked. "I used to hide in the vacant lot next door when it rained," Araminta explained, pointing to the window. "From there you can see the back gate of the house. Every Tuesday and Thursday she leaves with full bags and comes back with them empty. Sometimes she cries when she comes back." The information about Valdira crying disturbed Tobias deeply. In 15 years of marriage, he had rarely seen his wife show intense emotions. She had always been reserved, controlled, almost distant in her displays of affection. "Why do you think she cries?" he asked, sitting down to be at the girl's height. Araminta shrugged her shoulders. "My mom cried when she had to do things she didn't want to. She said that sometimes people do the wrong things for the right reasons." The child's words echoed in Tobias's mind throughout the morning. He decided to cancel his appointments at the stores and stay home, observing. He positioned himself strategically in the study, from where he could see both the main gate and the back entrance. At 2 in the afternoon, as Araminta had predicted, Valdira appeared in the hallway carrying a large bag. Tobias watched her through the internal cameras as she headed towards the safe. This time, however, he noticed something that had gone unnoticed in the recordings. Valdira's hands were shaking as she entered the password. He decided to follow his wife discreetly. He left the house through the main gate and followed her at a safe distance through the streets of Harmony Creek. Valdira walked quickly, always looking around as if she feared being discovered. After a 20-minute walk, she entered a neighborhood that Tobias knew only in passing, a peripheral area where simple houses and dirt roads predominated. Valdira stopped in front of a yellow corner house, relatively large by the standards of the neighborhood. Tobias hid behind a lamppost and watched his wife ring the doorbell. The door was opened by a man he immediately recognized, Kevin Butler, his accountant. What happened next left him completely confused. Instead of entering the house for a conspiratorial meeting, as he expected, 15 children of various ages ran out of the house and surrounded Valdira with shouts of joy. "Aunt Valdira! Aunt Valdira!" they shouted, hugging her with genuine enthusiasm. Tobias watched, perplexed, as his wife distributed packages of food, clothes, and toys that she took out of the bag. The children seemed to know her well, calling her affectionately Aunt and talking animatedly about their activities. Kevin stood beside her, helping with the distribution and talking with some of the older children about schoolwork. "What the hell is going on here?" Tobias muttered to himself. For an hour, he watched a scene that completely defied his expectations. Valdira was not conspiring with Kevin in some sophisticated financial scheme. She was taking care of children, many children, and by the evident affection between them, this had been happening for a long time. When Valdira finally said goodbye to the children, Tobias followed her back home. She walked slowly now, the empty bag swinging beside her body. Twice, he saw her stop to wipe her eyes, confirming Araminta's observation about the tears. Back at the mansion, Tobias found Araminta playing in the garden, building small houses with dry branches. The girl looked up when she saw him approach. "Did you follow her?" she asked directly. "How do you know?" "You have that look of someone who's discovered something they didn't expect," Araminta replied, returning her attention to the branches. My mom always said there are two kinds of secrets, the ones that hurt and the ones that protect. The child's precocious wisdom once again surprised Tobias. And which one do you think is the case with Valdira? Araminta stopped playing and looked directly at him. I think she's protecting someone. When she comes back crying, she doesn't look like a bad person who's done something wrong. She looks like a good person who's tired of carrying a weight alone. That afternoon, Tobias locked himself in his study again, but this time not to review financial reports. He took his laptop and began researching everything he could find about orphanages, support homes, and institutions for children in Harmony Creek. What he discovered left him even more confused. There was no official record of any institution operating at the address where he had seen Valdira. The property was registered in the name of a non-profit organization that he had never heard of, but that had legally existed for 5 years, exactly the period that Araminta had mentioned about the thefts. When Valdira arrived home at 5 in the afternoon, Tobias watched her through the cameras. She went straight to the bathroom, washed her face for several minutes, and then sat on the bed for almost half an hour, just looking at her own hands. There was something deeply melancholic in her posture, a sadness that Tobias had never noticed before. During dinner, Araminta's presence created a new dynamic at the table. The girl spoke naturally to both Tobias and Valdira, asking direct questions that broke the couple's usual silence. Aunt Valdira, why do you seem sad? Araminta asked, chewing a piece of steak. Valdira almost choked on her water. I'm not sad, honey, just a little tired. Tired of what? The girl insisted. Of housework, Valdira replied, avoiding looking at Tobias. Araminta turned to Tobias. And you, Mr. Albright, why are you always in the study counting papers instead of talking to Aunt Valdira? The question caught Tobias off guard. How could he explain to a 4-year-old that he had built his entire life around financial control, turning every personal relationship into a secondary matter? I work a lot, he said simply. But working isn't more important than people, Araminta replied. My mom worked a lot too, but she always had time to talk to me before bed. The silence that followed was awkward. Valdira stared blankly at her plate, and Tobias realized that there was something much more complex going on than a simple case of marital theft. That night, after Araminta went to sleep, Tobias decided to confront Valdira directly. He found her on the back porch, watching the stars with a distant expression. We need to talk, he said, sitting down next to her. Valdira stiffened immediately. About what? About the money you've been taking from the safe. About Kevin. About the children I saw today at the house in the Willow Creek neighborhood. Valdira's face turned completely pale. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, as if preparing for a moment she knew would inevitably come. You followed me, she said without surprise in her voice. Why, Valdira? Why are you doing this? She was silent for several minutes, tears beginning to stream down her face. When she finally spoke, her voice was filled with a pain that Tobias had never perceived before. Because they don't have anyone else, Tobias. And The sentence was interrupted by a sob that she tried to control. Tobias waited, feeling that he was about to discover something that would completely change his understanding of the woman he had been married to for 15 years. Valdira's words echoed on the porch like a painful echo of the past. She wiped away the tears with the back of her hand and looked at Tobias with a vulnerability that he had never seen before. I lost a baby, Tobias, before we got married. I never told you because I was afraid you would reject me. The revelation hit Tobias like a punch to the stomach. During 15 years of marriage, they had carefully avoided the subject of having children. He had always assumed that it was a mutual decision based on their professional goals and the lifestyle they had built. What do you mean you lost a baby? He asked, his voice coming out harsher than he intended. Valdira took a deep breath as if gathering courage to reveal a secret kept for decades. I was 28 years old, engaged to another man. I was 5 months pregnant when it happened. The doctors said there was a birth defect, that the baby wouldn't survive. I had to. She couldn't finish the sentence, but Tobias understood. The pain on his wife's face was visceral, real, filled with years of silence and guilt. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" he asked, feeling a mixture of anger and compassion. "Because after that, I found out I can't have children," Valdira replied, her voice breaking. "There were complications. And when I met you, I saw that you were a man focused on business, with no time for family. I thought it would be perfect that way." The silence that followed was heavy. Tobias processed the information, trying to understand how he had lived so long beside a woman carrying such emotional pain without realizing it. "And the children at the house? How did that start?" Valdira dried her eyes and composed herself slightly. 5 years ago, I was coming back from the grocery store when I saw a girl sleeping on the sidewalk in front of the downtown market. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. She was dirty, hungry, clearly abandoned. And you took her home. No, I knew you wouldn't approve, but I also couldn't just ignore it. So I contacted Kevin, because I knew he had contacts in social services because of his work. I asked if there was somewhere she could stay. Tobias vaguely remembered Kevin mentioning volunteer work, but he had never paid much attention. His contacts with the accountant were always strictly limited to financial matters. "Kevin told me that the official orphanages were overcrowded," Valdira continued, "and that many children ended up being separated or sent to inappropriate places. He was the one who suggested that we rent a house and take care of some of them informally." "With my money," said Tobias, unable to disguise the bitterness in his voice. Valdira looked directly at him without averting her gaze. "Yes, with your money, because I had no way to support those children alone, and because I thought that you, who had earned so much in life, could share a little without even noticing." The brutal honesty of the response left Tobias momentarily speechless. She was right. The amount she had taken from the safe, although significant over 5 years, represented a tiny fraction of his total fortune. "How many children?" he asked. "It started with 3. Now there are 15. All abandoned, orphaned, or taken from dangerous situations. And Kevin, what's his role in this?" "He helps with the legal side, organizes the documentation, knows social workers who guide us, and he also contributes financially with what he can." Tobias was silent for several minutes, processing the revelations. His wife had created an underground orphanage using his money, involving his most trusted accountant, and kept it all a secret for 5 years. It was impressive and disturbing at the same time. "Why the secrecy? Why didn't you tell me from the beginning?" Valdira laughed bitterly. "Tobias, you check the bank statement every day, question every expense over $50, install cameras at home to watch the employees. How did you think you would react if I came and said that I wanted to use your money to create an orphanage?" The description bothered him because it was absolutely accurate. Tobias had built his entire life around financial control, treating every relationship through the lens of business distrust. "But what now?" he asked. "What happens now that I've found out?" Valdira got up from her chair, walking to the railing of the porch. "Now you decide whether you're going to report me for theft or whether you're going to try to understand that there are things more important than total control over every penny." The provocation hit Tobias deeply. For 40 years, he had measured his success by the amount of money accumulated, by the growth of his business, by the financial security he had built. But now, a street kid had discovered a conspiracy he hadn't noticed, and his own wife had created a surrogate family he didn't know existed. "I want to meet the children," he said, surprising himself. Valdira turned around quickly. "What do you mean?" "I want to go to the house tomorrow. I want to see with my own eyes what you've built with my money. Tobias, they're traumatized children, It's not a spectacle to satisfy your curiosity. It's not curiosity, he replied, getting up too. It's responsibility. If my money has been supporting these children for 5 years, then somehow I'm already involved. I want to understand what's happening. Valdira hesitated, clearly worried about the children's reaction to the presence of a stranger. They don't know that the money comes from you. To them, I'm just an aunt who shows up to help. And Kevin, how does he explain your presence? He introduces himself as my husband. The information caught Tobias off guard. Your husband? It was the simplest story for the children to understand. A couple who decided to help children in need. It's easier than explaining the real situation. Tobias felt a pang of something he couldn't identify. Jealousy, irritation, or just confusion. And you play that role convincingly? Kevin is a kind man, Tobias. He lost his wife 10 years ago and never remarried. For him, taking care of these children also fills a void. The conversation was interrupted by small footsteps coming from inside the house. Araminta appeared on the porch, rubbing her eyes and holding her metal box. I had a nightmare, she said simply, approaching Valdira. Valdira immediately opened her arms and welcomed the girl, a maternal gesture that Tobias had never seen before. What was it, little one? I dreamed that I was alone again, Araminta murmured, nestling in Valdira's lap. That no one wanted to take care of me. That's never going to happen, Valdira said, stroking the child's hair. You're safe now. Tobias watched the scene with conflicting feelings. His wife demonstrated a natural maternal tenderness that he was completely unaware of, and Araminta, the street kid who had discovered his family's conspiracy, sought comfort in his wife as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Aunt Valdira, Araminta said, looking up, do you take care of other children like me? Valdira glanced quickly at Tobias before answering. Why do you ask that? Because I recognize the smell, Araminta said, sniffing Valdira's blouse. You smell like children, like when I was in the foster home before I came to the streets. The girl's observation was striking in its simplicity. Tobias realized that Araminta had identified something that he, even living with Valdira, had never noticed. You were in a foster home, asked Valdira, genuinely interested. For a while, after my mum passed away, but I fought with the other children and they kicked me out. Why did you fight? Asked Tobias, sitting down next to them. Araminta shrugged her shoulders. They said I was weird because I like to be alone and collect things from the trash, and because I see things that adults don't see. What kind of things? Insisted Valdira. Like when someone is lying, or when someone is sad, even when they're pretending to be happy. The adults at the foster home didn't like it when I said those things. Tobias and Valdira exchanged meaningful glances. Araminta's observational skills had been instrumental in revealing the orphanage conspiracy, but apparently that same ability had caused problems for her in the past. And where did you stay after you left the foster home? Asked Valdira. I built a little house in the vacant lot next door with pieces of wood and tarpaulin. It was small, but it was mine. Alone? A 4-year-old girl living alone? Araminta nodded naturally, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. I'm good at taking care of myself, and there are always people at the market who give me food when I help carry bags. The naturalness with which the child described her life on the streets broke Valdira's heart. Tobias realized that his wife was processing Araminta's situation through the lens of her experience with the other 15 children at the orphanage. Araminta, said Valdira softly, would you like to meet other children? Children who have been through situations similar to yours? Araminta's eyes lit up with interest. Are they nice? Won't they call me weird? They'll understand you perfectly, Valdira assured her. Tobias watched the conversation with growing understanding. Araminta wasn't just a child who had accidentally discovered his wife's conspiracy. She was exactly the kind of child that Valdira had dedicated 5 years of her life to helping. And now, by an irony of fate, The girl who had revealed the secret could become part of the family he never knew existed. The next morning, Tobias woke up with a determination he hadn't felt in years. For the first time in decades, his thoughts weren't focused on financial reports or store numbers. Instead, his mind was occupied with the prospect of meeting the 15 children his wife had secretly adopted as family. Araminta was in the kitchen helping Connie prepare sandwiches when he came down for breakfast. The girl had woken up excited about the promise of meeting other children, but she also showed an anxiety that Tobias was beginning to recognize as characteristic of someone who had learned to distrust sudden changes. "Mr. Albright," said Araminta, interrupting his thoughts. "If the children don't like me, can I go back to my little house in the vacant lot?" The question revealed the vulnerability behind the girl's apparent maturity. "Why wouldn't they like you?" asked Tobias. "Because I'm different. I see things and say things that make adults uncomfortable." Valdira entered the kitchen at that moment, wearing simpler clothes than usual. "Araminta, the children at the house are different too. Each of them has a unique story, and they've all learned that being different isn't a bad thing." During the drive to the Willow Creek neighborhood, Tobias observed the transformation in Valdira's behavior. She was more relaxed, more spontaneous, as if she was finally able to be herself after years of playing a role at home. Araminta, in turn, pointed to various places along the streets, telling stories of her survival adventures. "That's where I found my shoes," she said, pointing to a thrift store. "And that's where Mrs. Maria always gave me a piece of cake when there was some left over." When they arrived at the yellow house, Kevin was already waiting at the gate. Tobias greeted him with some tension. After all, the accountant had technically participated in a scheme involving his money without his authorization. "Tobias," said Kevin, extending his hand, "Valdira told me you found out everything. I hope we can talk about it." "We can talk," Tobias replied, shaking the accountant's hand. "But first I want to understand what you've built here." As they entered the house, Tobias was immediately surrounded by a group of curious children. They ranged in age from 5 to 14, all looking at him with the same mixture of caution and interest that Araminta had shown on the first night. "Kids," said Valdira, gathering them in the main room. "This is Tobias, my real husband. And this is Araminta, who will be staying with us for a while." The introduction caused a buzz among the children. Several of them approached Araminta with curiosity, while others watched Tobias with investigative looks. "Are you Aunt Valdira's rich husband?" asked a boy of about 8 years old. "I'm married to her, yes," Tobias replied, not quite knowing how to handle the situation. "Then you're going to take her away, and we won't see her anymore?" asked a girl of about 10 years old, with evident concern in her voice. The question revealed the fear that all the children carried: abandonment. Tobias realized that his presence there represented a potential threat to the stability that Valdira had created for them. "No," he said, surprising himself with the firmness of the answer. "I'm not going to take Valdira away from you." Over the next 2 hours, Tobias observed the dynamics of the house with growing admiration. Valdira wasn't just a benefactor who appeared sporadically. She knew each child individually, their specific needs, their fears and dreams. Kevin, in turn, assumed a natural paternal role, helping with homework and mediating conflicts. Araminta integrated into the group with an ease that surprised everyone. Her observational skills, which had caused problems in the foster home, were received with fascination by the other children. In a few minutes, she was teaching a 6-year-old boy how to identify when adults were worried versus when they were really angry. "She's special," commented Kevin, watching Araminta interact with the other children. "She has an impressive emotional maturity for her age." "Special and traumatized," added Valdira. "Like all of them." Tobias spent the morning talking individually with some of the children, listening to their stories. Each account was a window into a world of suffering and resilience that he had never imagined. There were children who had lost their parents in accidents, others who had been abandoned, some who had fled situations of domestic violence. "Why aren't you in official orphanages?" he asked Kevin during a private moment. "Some were, but official orphanages have limited resources," the accountant explained. "Others never reached the official system for various reasons, and some, as will probably be the case with Araminta, simply don't adapt to the institutional environment." "And is this legal?" Kevin sighed. "It's a grey area. Technically, we're a registered non-profit organization offering temporary support. It's not formal adoption, but it's also not abandonment. It's care." During lunch, Tobias observed a scene that deeply affected him. One of the youngest girls, approximately 5 years old, dropped her plate on the floor and immediately began to cry, shrinking into a defensive position as if she expected to be physically punished. Valdira approached the child calmly, crouched down to her height, and hugged her gently. "It's okay, Marina. It was just an accident. We'll clean it up together and get another plate." The girl's reaction, initial surprise followed by relief, revealed to Tobias the kind of trauma that these children carried. They had learned to expect punishment for minor mistakes. "How many of these children suffered physical violence?" he asked Kevin later. "Most of them. That's why Valdira developed this maternal approach. Many of them have never experienced genuine care." In the afternoon, as they prepared to leave, Araminta approached Tobias with her metal box. "Mr. Albright," she said, opening the box, "I want to show you something." From inside the box, she took out a faded photograph of a young woman holding a baby. "This is my mother, Solange." Tobias took the photograph and felt his blood run cold. He recognized that face. Solange Alencar had worked at one of his stores 6 years ago. He had fired her for suspected theft, suspicions that later proved unfounded, but too late. "Where did you get this photo?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "It was in Mom's things. She always talked about a very strict boss who didn't believe her when she said she hadn't stolen anything." The realization hit Tobias like lightning. Araminta wasn't a random child who had accidentally discovered his life. She was the daughter of a woman whose life he had destroyed with his paranoia and distrust. "Mr. Albright," continued Araminta, noticing his expression, "did you know my mother?" Tobias looked at the girl, the same intelligent eyes as Solange, the same determination that he had seen in the unjustly fired employee. "Yes," he said, his voice hoarse, "I knew your mother. Did she like you?" The question was simple, but loaded with meaning. Tobias remembered the last conversations with Solange, how she had begged him to reconsider, how she had cried as she cleaned her desk for the last time. "No," he answered honestly. "I was very unfair to her." Araminta nodded, as if she already knew the answer. She said that sometimes good people do bad things because they're afraid. She said that you were afraid of being robbed because you worked so hard to earn your money. The child's words were an echo of her mother's wisdom, and Tobias realized that Solange had tried to protect her daughter from carrying resentment for his injustice. That night, back at the mansion, Tobias convened a meeting with Valdira and Kevin. The presence of Araminta, who had settled naturally in the house as if she had always belonged there, made the conversation even more meaningful. "I want to legalize everything," he said without preamble. "The orphanage, the association, the care for the children. I want everything to be done the right way." Valdira and Kevin exchanged surprised glances. "What does that mean exactly?" asked Valdira. "It means I'm going to invest properly in the house, hire qualified professionals, ensure that all the children have proper documentation and access to quality education and health. And it means I'm going to adopt Araminta officially." "Tobias," said Valdira carefully, "are you sure about this? It's a big responsibility." "I'm sure. And I also want you to officially coordinate the project. Stop being a conspiracy and become your real job." Araminta, who had listened to everything in silence, approached Tobias. Does that mean I'm going to have a real family? It means you've always had a family, he replied, crouching down to be at her height. It just took me a while to realize it. Over the next 2 months, Tobias applied his obsession with control and organization to legalizing and properly structuring what Valdira had created intuitively. The house in the Willow Creek neighborhood was renovated and expanded, professionals were hired, and each child received individualized support. Araminta flourished in the new environment. Her observational skills, now valued instead of feared, made her a natural bridge between the younger children and the adults. She helped to identify when a child was going through emotional difficulties, serving as an early warning system for the staff. Tobias discovered that applying his business experience to a purpose that really mattered was more rewarding than accumulating wealth. He developed tracking systems for each child, created partnerships with local schools, and established a permanent fund to ensure the sustainability of the project. Kevin officially assumed financial and legal coordination, while Valdira became the pedagogical and emotional director. Their marriage, which had become an empty charade, was revitalized by a shared purpose. "You know what's funny?" Valdira said to Tobias one night, watching Araminta play in the garden with other children who had come to visit them. "I robbed you for 5 years to create a family, and in the end, you gained the family you never knew you wanted." Tobias smiled, watching Araminta teach the other children how to identify different types of clouds. "She was right from the beginning. You were robbing me. But you weren't robbing money. What was I robbing then? You were robbing my chance to be a better person." 6 months after the discovery, the Solange Alankar Association, named in honor of Araminta's mother, had become a model for other similar initiatives in the region. Tobias had found a purpose that went beyond the accumulation of wealth. Valdira had realized her maternal dream more fully than she had ever imagined, and Araminta had found not only a family, but a vocation. The girl who had arrived on a stormy night to reveal a conspiracy had, in fact, revealed something much deeper, that sometimes the greatest riches are those that cannot be counted, only felt. And Tobias Albright, the businessman who had spent 40 years measuring his success in numbers, finally learned that the real value of a life lies in the people we choose to protect and love, especially those who most need care. The house that had once been silent and cold now echoed with children's laughter, and for the first time in his life, Tobias understood that he had discovered the most important form of investment, investing in the future of those whom the world had forgotten, but who still carried within themselves the infinite capacity to transform pain into hope. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story, giving it a score from 0 to 10. And thank you very much.